Good afternoon. Okay. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and this would really concern, it could be someone who has just received a recon denial and has to appeal for an ALJ hearing. It can also actually be pertinent for someone who just got an initial denial and needs to appeal for a recon uh, appeal, reconsideration. Now, I got to be delicate about this perhaps, but some people, and I'm speaking to people who have representatives, because if they're on their own, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. But they might get a little bit of information from this, and that might guide them a little differently than just going all trigger happy on an appeal. Again, I feel like I have to be delicate here. Oftentimes, uh, it is not best to shoot out an appeal for an ALJ hearing right away. There is 8 weeks approximately of very valuable time that could be used. Because remember, once you file for an ALJ hearing, your days are numbered in terms of what you can do to work on your case. And remember, most significant part of working up a case comes from you, the claimant, about your treatment. There are things outside of your control, like how well your providers articulate, whether your attorney or non-attorney rep is going to be able to ask them some specific questions to get more clarity on their opinion about your functioning. Some of you refer to those as RFCs, medical source statements. We usually call them. Some people, and because those should not be generics that you print off of the internet, God forbid. And they should be handcrafted, if you will, and tailored to your specific medical records from that doctor, with a consideration of all the other medical records that do and will exist in your case, pending hearing, because the resulting medical source statement, if you get one, has to be really reflective of those records. So you don't want to be asking questions that are going to put a fork in it. So um, that shooting off, this is the way I feel about it. And there are exceptional cases where this doesn't really get implicated. But I would say a lot of the time, at least 50% of the time, it does. The time when a representative who's like a hands-on representative versus a let's just press the buttons and file a notice of appeal, that time is really valuable. For instance, if there have been, from the time the SSA or other provision of records to the attorney or any other source last provided records during reconsideration, the representative might very well be ordering those while they're in that time period where they're getting ready to file the appeal. And of course, they've already waited for the claimant, their client's information that will be relevant to the appeal, however they gather that data. And they can be shooting out medical record requests because that way those records will be closer to having been received by the time the ALJ office gets the appeal, and they will have more to work on. In case you didn't know, there's such a thing as on the record awards. Sometimes if a case is extremely well worked up, the client has been vigorous following all advice about getting specialists for every impairment they talk about, as opposed to just like letting a PCP think about it. When I say PCP, I mean primary care provider. Um, there, there is a lot that can be done. So let's say you know, as you're going through the appeal, the client still hasn't done all that, specialist gathering and hitching onto a specialist. That will be reviewed, and to see how important that is before the appeal goes out, because you want those appointments, if they're going to finally get on board with a specialist, to start being scheduled so that it can be included when the appeal goes out. It doesn't mean it necessarily has to happen that way, but that is probably best practices. So that's one thing. You know, getting on and giving a little nag about what the claimant hasn't been doing that they were told to do from the beginning. And I know getting specialists is so inconvenient and it's such a pain. And many claimants are already treating a lot. But, the job of the representative is to consistently give you the best advice. Whether or not you're going to choose to follow it is a whole nother story. But that is what that time can be used for and should be used for, in addition to getting the appeal ready to be filed. But again, would you trigger happy file it when you've got some things that maybe the claimant can be working on that would be more helpful to be done now than later after the appeal has been filed? Not necessarily. Sometimes a claimant doesn't really provide responsive answers to the questions on an appeal data form. Some of us use appeal data form to gather information for the appeal that we then draft up the appeal for our clients. I know some lawyers just let their clients file the appeal sight unseen. I'm not really speaking to them because that's not what we do. And this is really more for a claimant who is not represented, things they can do instead of just trigger happy filing an appeal when they don't know what's going on, or for claimants who do have a representative and they're wondering why the appeal hasn't been filed. It should have been filed the day after I got denied. Here's why that's probably not, by and large, not a good idea. I know there's impatience and frustration and things are getting tight, but I'm always filled with cliches. Haste makes waste. Look at it kind of like if there's something that needs to be sauteed on low heat and it's going to take a bit of time for it to saute and have all the flavors, meld and all that, and you're impatient, and this is how I am when I'm at the stove, and this is why I'm laughing about it, because my husband's the cook and I'm not. I tend to rush those things and I get an ugly mess after, and it doesn't taste so great. So, I'll jam up the heat because I'm like, a little faster is a little better, right? Higher heat, faster. I'd say 90% of the time it doesn't work. So do you want to go with the 10% it might work, or would you rather go with the 90% and take a few extra weeks? It's just a few weeks of putting in the effort and having some patience to get all those things that maybe you were, hoping you could slide by a little longer with a primary care when really you should get a specialist. Now's the time. Specialist appointments do not come quick, particularly if you're on Medicaid. It might take you 5 months to get that appointment, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. And I've said this before, but I'll throw it in. If you do make an appointment and it's 5 months out or 6 months out or 4 months out or 8 months out, because that's all your provider that takes the Medicaid has openings for, get on their cancellation list. That I don't know a single office that doesn't have one, so that if someone else cancels, you're on that list to be filling that slot. Doesn't always work, but I see it work quite a bit, and they get a quicker appointment. So don't hesitate to do that. You can also, I see no reason why you can't schedule a few. If there's a few different doctors that are the specialists you need, schedule more than schedule one and then see if you can get a quicker one, and then schedule the quicker one. Go to that one, see how it goes, cancel the later one if that's the case and you're going to be sticking with this doctor. Fair game in my mind. Schedule the two and then cancel the second one. The later one, you don't necessarily have to cancel it the day you get the earlier appointment. See how that one goes if there's enough time gap. But then you do want to cancel it so that they can fill it with another needy person who needs a specialist appointment. Okay. Yeah. So, and also if it's a representative handling your appeal, there can be a lot of behind the scenes work you don't realize between ordering records that you want to get to go in with the appeal or right after the appeal is filed. Those things could take a few weeks for, sometimes the providers won't provide them in a timely manner, so you're going to have to appeal without them. But if they can and do, that's not a bad idea, because sometimes those will reveal things that the claimant doesn't even know about, and it can be added to the appeal. So, an appeal isn't just like, da da da, I appeal. I mean, it is if that's the way, you do it or your representative does it. But for the representatives that actually work in your cases and are really in their, up to their elbows in your case, There's going to be more to it than that. Things that you don't even know about. A lot of them are going to be doing, workshopping your case in preparation for the appeal. I know I just did today's a weekend, and I just did one, had 2 hours in with my one of my associates. So, we do what we have to do because we want this to be done right. And, the appeal isn't due for weeks, but if a claimant is going to be impatient about getting an appeal in, you know, that's really not that acceptable. I know we tolerate it, but the offer is always then do it on your own and we can withdraw because we don't do anything slacky. It's just not going to happen here. If you want slacky, it's going to have to be somebody else, right? And I think a lot of hands-on attorneys and non-attorney reps feel the same way. They put their hands right in that case, and they're going to be looking under every crumb. And that does not happen overnight. And one thing to also remember is your representative, you have not retained that representative to be, you be their, they work for you. You are their exclusive client. You could, but it'd probably cost you about $150,000. Rather, you didn't pay anything. And of course, that representative has other clients and claimants that they are helping get over the finish line to prevail on their claim. Not your problem and not your business, but if you think they're only working for you, you're mistaken, by and large, unless of course you have an exclusive contract with them. And I have yet to see that occur. So I doubt it. All right. What else can be done if you self-represent during this time? Right. Hit up all the specialists, look at all your impairments that you put in your initial filing, in your recon, and anything you reported to the SSA in the interim, like if you sent up a new doctor to an adjudicator, you're going to want to make sure that all those records are in your file. So you should be reviewing your file. Now, your attorney or non-attorney rep is doing this already while you are waiting for the appeal because that's how they get through all these things. And it's very time consuming. But you're going to want to be doing that. If you don't have a copy of your file, you should get one. Call the SSA and say, I need a copy of my file. I have to determine how I'm appealing this. Ask for it to be expedited. Ask it to be emailed or put in your ssa.gov My Account site access. Or tell them to mail you all the papers, the entire file in paper, whatever you want to do. That's the only way you're going to know what's in there and what you're maybe a little weak on. Ordering those records that are outstanding, once you know what they are, you need to get on that. Or if you have a representative, they're doing it anyway. Things that you don't see them doing behind the scenes. What else? Anything you didn't report yet that you've forgotten to report. Maybe it's not your big complaint. You're going to want to make sure that that starts to get in there. Because remember, little impairments, big and small, all count. All right, so rushing into an appeal, by and large, not wise. Your impatience is not your best friend. There's a lot of work to be done. So you're either doing it or you're getting someone else to do it for you. Yeah. And then, of course, once the appeal is filed, your work does not stop. It doesn't stop for your representative, your attorney. It doesn't stop for you. Treat. Update those diagnostics if they're not reasonably updated, and your attorney or your rep will tell you what's considered, perhaps needing to be updated. Use the time wisely. You can't get it back. And if you get to an ALJ hearing and you don't have all those ducks in a row, it's on you. You might be the biggest cause of a denial if you don't do those things and use every day you have during recon, in between denials and appeals, to be working on that. That's not a sit down time. That's not a rest time. You might think it is, but it's not. All right. Bye, guys.